It was an early morning candle. Both Luna and Celestia were having breakfast and were talking about their upcoming days of their duties. Celestia mentioned she was going to spend time and going to visit some local business, and Luna was going to go to elementary school to since she had been asked by the teacher if she could spend time with students so they can get to know their princess even better by asking some questions like that. And even though Luna had no idea, didn't mind to help to go to school and spend some time and maybe let to get to know the students better, they both agreed that they will do this. But sadly, since they both had hoped of being able to spend time, perhaps even take a lunch together. But since Luna and Celestia will be away for that, so they won't be able to see each other, but they decided to have lunch for the next day. Around after breakfast, Luna went to school and all the students loved to see their new princess. They actually asked a lot of questions like how it's like to rule a kingdom, how it's like to be one of the princesses who rules a kingdom, and it just some more innocent question. And one of the students actually asked if Luna had a boyfriend. She did answer a lot of those questions, like if it's tough to rule a kingdom, and she said yes, it is tough to rule a kingdom. And most ponies just imagine it's like easy to rule to be a ruler of a whole kingdom, but the truth is it isn't that easy. You have to been take care of all kinds of things like you have to sign documents always. You have to be having royal meetings, but this still offer for that. It is very excited, even so tiring, but to being a part of the big business like be ruling our kingdom is fun. Even it has its tough moments. But when the student asked if Luna had a boyfriend, she was silent for a brief moment and shook her head and said, "No, I don't have a boyfriend. In fact, I never had a boyfriend ever. Ever since even before I was an Hyper Moon, I never even thought about it." That question, though, still echoed in her mind even after she left school. As she was walking back to the castle later in the afternoon, "Do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a boyfriend?" I was echoed in her mind repeatedly. Ever since Luna and Celestia became the rulers of Equestria over 1,000 years ago, she has never been considered to be dating any pony. Or at least she didn't thought much about stallions in that considered mind. But after 1,000 years, now in the modern age, she believed maybe it was time to find a pony to be with. But when she mentioned this to her sister later in the evening around dinner, she thought about dating some pony though. But Celestia actually was happy that to know Luna was willing to start looking for a boyfriend. But she first wanted to still think about it, and Celestia actually agreed to that. But after a couple of days, Luna actually thought about maybe try to do some dating, but she had no idea what to do since she has never been dating any pony at all. But she did overheard one of the two guards talking about one of them has been recently become engaged with a mare when he met at the speed dating service in Cantonal. When she asked the two guards about what speed dating is and where it was located, the both guards actually explained how the speeding works and what it's like. After that explanation, and she left. But still, that explanation and the same question she heard from the student days earlier, she thought maybe what about if I could try this speed dating? Maybe it is something that After all, after what she heard from the guards that speed dating apparently is quite popular in most cities like Manhattan and Nottingham, and even including in Canada. So she thought try to do that on a Friday. And since when Friday arrived, she went to this location, and when the coordinator for this place saw Luna, she believed maybe Luna was there to do some sort of inspection. But Luna said it was not that the case. She was in fact there to try this speed dating. The coordinator was surprised, but even when Luna arrived at this place, she saw there were at least a number of stallions and mares who was been there. And when the son of mares and stallions who was close to her actually heard this, they asked her if she was even serious about this, and she said yes. She was actually willing to try something new, and she was actually looking for a serious relationship with some pony. And after that, Luna signed some papers, and then the service started. Luna was in fact matched with several stallions and even a few mares, but unfortunately, she didn't find any sort of connection to any of them. She started feeling maybe this was hopeless. Just before the entire service was going to end for the day, she was matched with a unicorn by the name Moonrise. Moonrise and Luna actually had some sort of connection there. They liked the same kind of things, and turned out that in fact Moonrise wasn't even originally from Canada. He was actually from Trottingham, but he has been living majority of his life in Canada. He moved from Trottingham when he was about 5, and when he mentioned that he actually owns his own bookstore in Canada, and he loves to read books, different genres like horrors, adventures, even some thrillers. But when he asked Luna her favorite book series, or at least the type of book that she loves to read most, she said adventures like Daring Do. That made him eyes on her even more, because when he mentioned he loves to read Daring Do, and they were actually quite happy to hear about that. Even after the service was over, Luna was quite sad that she didn't find any pony that she may have thought as a potential boyfriend, except that she had at least some connection with Moonrise. After they both left the area, the Moonrise suggests maybe they can go to this cafe nearby to have something to eat. Since it was only 2 p.m., and Luna actually was getting hungry, and she agreed. So they went to the location, had something to eat, and they start talking more about their different personalities, like some of their comedy interests and like that. Even when they talked about Daring Do, Moonrise suggests maybe if she would like to some time, maybe read some Daring Do together. And even though they had no idea where they could spend some time, when Luna suggests they could go to the castle garden, where the most quiet place they could find at the castle, and the staff could even bring them something to eat while they were reading. Moonrise was silent for a brief moment and thought, why not? It sounds like a good idea. So they thought about doing that on the next day. Even after they left the cafe, maybe an hour later, Luna actually felt a bit happy. Even though that she felt a bit sad that she didn't find any boyfriend or at least a potential at this speed dating, but she was quite happy that she had made a new friend. At least that's a good thing to happen. But back at the castle, during the dinner, Celestia asked Luna how this speed dating went. She was a bit curious to know more, but unfortunately she didn't find any pony to be connected to except when she mentioned Moonrise. At least she made a new friend. So, but the next day, Moonrise arrived to the castle, and they both went to the castle garden to have something to have fun. They actually start talking. reading the most recent Daring Do book. And after all, they loved the book series. After they read for nearly 2 hours, after at least 3 to 4 chapters out in the book, they decided to take a break, and when the staff came out with some sandwiches and something to drink. During their break, though, they actually talked about this particular book. What they thought about it was some bad parts, good parts, and what they talked about some of the characters, like some of the villains, for example, what they thought about it. They actually had a good points, good opinions about that. Even when they both said that she preferred maybe the villain could have been perhaps even better, also had some a different dialogue. They actually agreed, and even though they didn't agree on some of the comments or opinions, but they always made to listen. Even after all this, they continued to do this, meeting up at the castle garden to read more. But after on the fourth time, Moonrise actually asked Luna if she wanted to go out with him, and for a brief moment she was silent. The reason turned out that after the third time, he started to have feelings for Luna. At first, he maybe believed that this was only a brief moment of feelings for her, but the feelings, they never faded. He believed that he had fallen in love with her, and in fact, he had. But he wasn't even sure if Luna would like him back in the same way. But when now he had asked her out, he was waiting for an answer. The waiting felt like an eternity. But when she said yes, she wanted to go out with him. They decided to have a picnic at the lake that was close by to the city. So they decided to go there the next day. But the next day, Luna actually had packed a basket with some sandwiches, some cookies, an apple pie, and even some apple cider from both. But since he was as a unicorn, he couldn't even fly there, so Luna didn't mind to teleport both of them to the spot where they could find this location near the lake. They actually brought even their Daring Do books together. They actually spent their picnic date by reading the Daring Do books together and talked about it, having some of the picnics and just having such a great time. No matter what happens, they actually enjoyed it. In fact, they even stayed there even when the sun went down and she raised the moon. They actually start talking more and didn't mind it. But for a brief moment, when Luna turned around, when she looked back, Moonrise was holding a blue rose in his mouth and then asked if Luna wanted to be his girlfriend. She was quite surprised at this suggestions, or at least this way how to ask her. But she smiled and said yes, she would like that. Then he placed the rose behind one of her ears, and they actually then shared the first kiss together. No matter what, Luna thinks she may have found a true soulmate. But she wants to take this relationship slowly. After all, Moonrise is in fact her very first boyfriend ever. They stay there for at least maybe for another hour before going back to the castle. But they were in fact returned back to the castle around midnight, and it was late for him to go back, so Luna showed them to a guest room. She actually was very happy to have found a boyfriend. Even after a couple of days, the entire general public had become aware that Luna had a boyfriend, and they were actually very excited. Ever since Luna came out telling that she had a boyfriend, a unicorn by the name Moonrise, the entire public was very excited. Even when her friend Twilight and her friends was told about this, they were actually surprised though. She had actually invited them back to the castle to Canterlot to have some tea, and they started talking about Moonrise and they want to know more about him. She answered those questions as best she could. But when Rarity then mentioned about potential marriage, Luna blushed and said she hadn't even thought about that. After all, she and Moonrise has only been dating for at least about a week per point. Even though she had the thought maybe that if if it could be long enough, maybe she would end up married him. But at the same time, she didn't want to rush into some sort of relationship with somebody at that so far. Even Applejack and the others actually agreed to that. Even Celestia herself was very happy to see that Luna had found a boyfriend. And even though Luna's relationship with Moonrise in fact remained strong, even after all this, they never thought about anything else. They loved to spend so much time. But even they realized that since Luna is a princess, sometimes they were unable to see each other for sometimes for a couple of days to maybe a week. Since being a princess and ruler of a kingdom takes a lot of time. Even after all this, after the first couple of days after when she realized, will this relationship even work? Will it even work out as well? Knowing that they were sometimes would be unable to even see each other, she was afraid. This long distance, sometimes they were unable to see each other, would tear apart their relationship. When she mentioned this to Celestia, she told her not to be worried about this. He loves her more than anything. And she was right. Even when she mentioned this to Moonrise herself. He smiled and said, even when we don't see each other for so often, we will make it work. I will never want to leave you, ever. You are my beautiful star in the night sky, he said. That always makes her smile and laugh and said, yeah, I'm sorry about that and being so worried about that. But he smiled and said, nothing to be worried about. He completely understand that. After all, since he knows that he is Luna's first boyfriend, he just doesn't. He just doesn't. He just don't want to make her worried. Even one day when she was out for a walk, when she saw Moonrise spend time with a mare, she was actually first believed this was maybe as a friend. And in fact, it was a friend of his. They were just standing there talking and laughing, and just, she actually heard why they were laughing. They were actually talking about an old childhood memory. And it turned out this mare was an old friend of his who from Trottingham who came to see him for a visit. Even after such much great time with each other. But then it came to one point that could have ended their entire relationship apart. Luna was one day out for a walk in town, just to get some fresh air, when she did see Moonrise at the cafe with another mare, was not the same one, not seeing the same one she had seen before. This was in fact a local pony, she managed to figure out. This mare was holding his hoof, laughing, and even smiling at him. She believes maybe this mare was maybe trying to be affection towards him. But he smiled and laughed himself and said, no, why? But she was afraid that he was in fact dating this mare behind Luna's back. Because Moonrise didn't even see Luna was standing on the road, and she walked away before anything could have been seen. But when he came to the castle a couple of days later, she thought about this and brought this up. He was actually stunned. He didn't even see her on the street, he said. But when she heard about this and even asked who that mare was, and she told him if there was some pony that he had been seeing except from her, she would be heartbroken. But it turned out, in fact, it wasn't anything like any romantic emotions between him and that mare. And in fact, it was in fact his own co-worker at the bookstore. And she was actually asking him some advice. It turned out she was getting married with another stallion, and she wanted to have his opinion about what things to do for the wedding. And since Moonrise was going to be invited to the wedding, and she just wanted his opinion what kind of food they should serve, and what kind of music they should play, except for the wedding march like that. And she loved his opinions. She saw him as a brother, a friend. And Luna smiled, gave a big sigh, and thought she had not the words of such big things. And in fact, it turned out she was right. This mayor only wanted Moonrise's opinion about different things. And Moonrise then laughed and said, every time you see with a mayor, you don't have to worry. Things that I would never been cheating on you, ever. Now I have this amazing mayor to be with. Why would I do anything to harm you or even our relationship? That would be strange to me. I mean, I would never want to hurt anything like you. And that made her smile and cry a little bit and said, I'm sorry, Moonrise. I just felt a bit worried though. That's all. And Moonrise smiled and said, well, you don't have to worry. I love you, my little Luna. Love my little moon any more than I ever could say for. And that made his heart for her racing faster. After Luna and Moonrise had been dating for about 3 years, they actually got engaged when he asked her if she wanted to marry him. But they decided to wait for the wedding for maybe another year because since they had only been dating for about 3 years and now been engaged, and Luna didn't mind that to wait for maybe a little more time. But as the year passed, they was now ready to get married. Luna had asked Cadence to be her bridesmaid, and Moonrise had asked one of his best friends from who lived in Trondheim to be his best man. And of course, it was a great wedding. Pinky organized the party afterwards, like she has been requested. At the party, Luna and Moonrise danced for the very first time and looked each other deep in the eyes, and they felt like they were the only ones there. When Celestia saw them dancing like that, she felt both excited and happy. She smiled and said to herself, well, Luna, I'm happy for you. They were actually very so happy to be married one another most of all. They later in fact went to a tropical island for their honeymoon for a whole week, where they swam in the ocean, went sightseeing on the island, just having such great time. And barely when they came back on their honeymoon, from their honeymoon, Moonrise and Luna was now happy to have entered a new chapter in their lives together. And just barely 2 years later, Luna announced to the kingdom she and Moonrise was expecting their first baby, and it turned out to be a daughter. And when the daughter was born, it turned out she was an alicorn. But barely 5 years later, Luna announced they were expecting another baby, but this time to be twins. But they didn't exactly know what gender or what they was going to be, unicorn or alicorn. But when the twins was born, they in fact had a boy and a girl, and both were in fact alicorns. They were actually surprised to have both as alicorn, but at the same time a daughter and a son as an alicorn. They were super excited. They could not even be happier. Even after all this, Luna and Moonrise was really, really happy to have found a special sound pony that they loved the most. Even have 3 children together. If Luna hadn't been going to this speed dating location service, she may not have even met Moonrise. And Moonrise himself, but he had not even met Luna, his future soulmate. They would have missed out so much joy if they hadn't even seen each other at the speed dating days. And this is how Luna and Moonrise found a true love and a big family together. The end.